I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about the Nutty Professor.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we are going to be watching Spike Lee's Malcolm X. This is a 3.5 hour extravaganza of a film. Andrew, it's a film you've seen before.
Yes.
Any words of wisdom to give me before I go into this viewing?
Oh no, you've read the autobiography, right?
I have.
It's just that.
Okay. Sounds good.
And it's maybe arguably the best Spike Lee movie.
I'm ready. I'm pumped. I think it'll be a great way to celebrate Juneteenth and great way to see some black cinema. I'm ready. I'm pumped.
Yeah.
But this week we're watching the Jerry Lewis film,
Mm-hmm.
The Nutty Professor. Probably his most famous film, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would say
Yeah.
so. Mostly because it's really only I feel like though it's only famous because of the Eddie Murphy movies.
Yeah.
I think when you go up to an average person our age, maybe a little older, and you say like the Nutty Professor, they'll just immediately think of the Eddie Murphy movies, right?
Yeah. I didn't even know until within the last few years that it was a remake. Like I didn't know there was a Jerry Lewis Nutty
Exactly.
Professor.
Yeah. And of course, the big difference between the two is that he's large in the Eddie Murphy movies. He's like kind of like a large nerdy guy. I've never seen those Eddie Murphy movies, but
Neither have I.
it's just one of those things where it's like everybody is kind of, Eddie Murphy is such a huge star, arguably more famous than Jerry Lewis.
Oh yeah, and definitely, I think just within when we were kids, like that, the Nutty Professor was in the zeitgeist. I don't know when that movie came out. Did it come out in the early 2000s or was it just
I think I have it right here. It like came out in '96. So I mean,
okay? So right around where we were born.
that's just one of those movies where when you're a kid, you maybe see it on TV or you might see it at like a
Yeah,
video store or something like that. So I
yeah.
think most people when they hear the Nutty Professor, they'll think of that movie.
But this movie, on the other hand, is arguably Jerry Lewis's most famous film and probably the film that made Jerry Lewis, because this is his second feature, correct? After The Bellhop?
The Bellboy, I think is what it's called. Yeah, I guess made him is arguable. I don't know. Yeah, he wrote the movie. Yeah, he wrote the movie, starred in the movie, directed the movie. Came out like 3 years after his first movie, The Bellboy, which is a solid little film. The Bellboy though is more of like a after I will say after watching The Nutty Professor, it's like Jerry Lewis, he really likes gags a lot, and that's kind of what The
Yeah.
Bellboy is too. It's like a series of gags.
Okay.
I've seen like three Jerry Lewis movies, and they're all kind of like similar constructions in that they're kind of a series, like I guess like a series of like gags, right? In which
Mm-hmm.
like which a character kind of the Jerry Lewis character kind of like operates in, right? So
Yeah.
the Nutty Professor does have some different things though compared to like his first movie.
So would you say then the Jerry Lewis character, the Nutty Professor he plays in this, is that sort of a similar character that he plays in his other early films?
Sure. I mean, I've only seen like a few, but like so like look, Jerry Lewis, like I think most people our age will know him from the King of Comedy movie, which
Only thing I know him from.
yeah, that's like the one and only thing that I think most of people our age
Yeah.
will know him from is the Martin Scorsese King of Comedy movie, which he's amazing in.
Incredible.
He's so funny, but he's not doing the Jerry Lewis character. He's basically just
No.
acting like himself.
Yeah, he's like a Bob Hope kind of sort of right sort of
Like
thing.
a like a like yeah, he's playing like a late night, comedy host.
Yeah.
Who's been doing it for a really long time and he has all these raving fans and stuff like that. Like Johnny Carson.
Johnny Carson, yeah.
He's really good in it. But Jerry Lewis is famous just because like he does these really kind of insanely bumbling, kind of foolish characters that
Yeah.
make funny faces and fall down a lot. I've never watched a single of like the Martin and Lewis stuff. Obviously, that was the thing that made him famous. And it's the same thing
Sure.
there. He's like he's doing like a stupid guy kind of type of character. And I can see like plenty of people my age watching it and being like, that was not funny. I don't get it. But I like when Jerry Lewis is kind of like going crazy and he's
Yeah.
like running around and falling down and stuff. Like when he's in the gym. My complaint with that scene is that he should have done more gags with the exercise equipment.
Yes. I cannot help but agree. He definitely seems inspired by the work of the silent era, the Harold Lloyd, the Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, very sort of physical comedy. I think a lot of his jokes, at least in The Night Professor, this is the only Jerry Lewis film I've seen, I think, of comedy, which he's in, but it's not a Jerry Lewis film. He seems very much more interested in the physical gags, especially as in ways of his body and it's sort of playing into the smallness of himself as a person more so than sort of the gags of the spoken word, I suppose. Like he seems a lot less interested in that. I mean, there are quite a few of those, and it is a funny film to listen to, but I think it's a much more enjoyable experience to just see and not hear than hear and not see.
I don't know why, but like maybe it's because like you and I haven't we haven't recorded in a little while for various
Yeah.
reasons, and I think I've done more reading for this episode than maybe any other episode. I decided to read Jerry Lewis's book
Okay.
called The Total Filmmaker, which is a book that was put together. I think he did like I don't know what the word is, like a visitation, like a professor like visitation at
Hmm.
like a film college, and I think his lectures were like written out for this book that was put
Oh,
together
very
called The
cool.
Total Filmmaker, and yeah, he mentions Charlie Chaplin and specifically the film Modern Times many
Okay.
times throughout the book. Yeah, I don't know why. Like I've done so much reading on like I don't know why like this particular movie. Like we've watched like amazing movies, like movies that I would say are perfect, but for some
Yeah.
reason like this movie, I find Jerry Lewis to be like a very interesting filmmaker. Especially because like the book is actually like a really great like book on filmmaking. He has like a very clear philosophy. The total filmmaker like being like this idea of like uh, trying to be involved as much as possible in every part of the filmmaking process as you can, learning about everything and everyone. And it's kind of a special book to read because it's Jerry Lewis talks, throughout about like balancing like people's like egos and personalities and skills. And it's like it makes me like really stressed out reading it
Why does it make you stressed?
because it's so like because he just like makes it and I already pretty much knew this, but like he just makes it seem like just like such a daunting task to be able to like manage everyone and like work with everyone. Like it just sounds like a fucking nightmare every single time, but it's a really great, funny, interesting book. And it's just kind of funny because like that book is so clear, and it's so I find his perspective so interesting and powerful. And I like the Jerry Lewis movies, but it's just kind of funny. Like, and other people have pointed this out, how like in the book, it's so meticulous about, and it talks about how Jerry Lewis is meticulous in his movies, but then his movies themselves don't really feel that way. They feel
Yeah.
really, which I like. I do like it.
Yeah. I never would have really guessed that. At least for my experience with this film, he seems sort of very of the moment, sort of off the wall. The fact that he's such a meticulous filmmaker makes him all the more fascinating. And I think I'm much more interested in Jerry Lewis, the person and the filmmaker, than I actually am in his films. Of course, again, I must keep reiterating that this is the only Jerry Lewis film I've seen, so I'm certainly not a scholar on Jerry Lewis, but I find something about the human Jerry Lewis and the filmmaker endlessly fascinating.
Yeah. But ultimately, for me personally, I do like the Nutty Professor. And it's like the idea is that like he plays a professor, Julius. And he's like a
Mhm.
nerd. He does like a nerdy, awkward character. He really plays it up. His characters are just they're he's always playing it up. And I like the opening where he's like doing all like the chemistry stuff,
Yeah.
and like everybody freaks out. I like when there's a big explosion and like the sets like move and shake. Like I like
Yeah.
that. I also laughed when like the firefighters show up and they're all like slipping and falling trying to like put out the fire. I laughed like quite a bit at that. Like right away I find it's so like it's not like that smart, but I really
Yeah.
don't care. I just love like the I don't know. I like the physical stuff a lot. I think more and more people are afraid to do that.
Yeah. I can't help but agree. I find the physical stuff to be silly. And I think part of the problem is filmmakers are very afraid to see themselves as silly, and actors even more so are afraid to see themselves as silly. They want to be seen, even
Yeah.
when they're doing comedy, they want it to be serious, right? They want it to be a think piece.
They
Even
want to be
the
cool as hell.
yeah, even their funny stuff has to have some sort of nuance to it. It can't just be silly for the sake of silly, where in this Jerry Lewis plays a very silly character.
Right, especially at the beginning, and you know, he has a crush on one of the students, you know, and he's embarrassed by his own students too. Like, there's a jock that embarrasses him. This is one of those movies, by the way, where it's like, are we in a high school, or is it college, or is it like a graduate college? Because at the end of the movie they have a prom, which isn't really a
Yes,
college thing,
not
but
that I know of.
the students, especially the men, look really old, and
So old.
they're wearing like Letterman jackets and stuff like that. So I don't know what see, stuff like that is just kind of like Jerry Lewis talks about how meticulous and like how just like focused he is.
Yeah.
But then he makes decisions where it's like, why did you decide? You know, it's like it's so funny to me. I love it. But yeah, he's like embarrassed by the Chad jocks and stuff, and he gets upset.
Yeah, there's this very wonderful moment, which I would argue is my favorite joke that runs throughout the film, when he's being talked to by the dean of the school, which that whole scene is wonderful because it
Oh, the Dean
goes,
guy is really great.
the dean
That's a
guy's
good
great.
character. That's funny.
And that scene goes on for a super long time and it's super quiet. Like there's almost no sound design. It's
Yeah.
almost just complete
Oh yeah,
silence except for like the little moving
the sound
around.
design in that scene is really good. Yeah, stuff like that is like,
Mhm.
okay, this okay, the stuff like that does is there's also simultaneously stuff where it's like, oh yeah, that is really good.
He's got these moments that are just fantastic. And in that moment, he just sits there for so long. I mean, it's so patient and it really just kind of gets on your nerves because it goes on and on and on, like way longer than any modern filmmaker would want to, because it makes you feel uncomfortable as a viewer. And
Yeah.
they go through the whole scene and he's yelling at him. And the best part, which goes throughout the movie, is whenever he opens his little watch, just the fucking loudest song plays of all
Yeah.
time.
It's such a weird joke because it's like, yeah, it's like a marching band
Yeah.
like song or whatever, like coming out of his watch, and it's like really like when it happens you're just like, wait, what, like what happened, like it's like a
Yeah.
song is playing out of the clock, it's like, really, that was the out of the pocket watch, it's like, really, that was the joke, it's like, but I don't know, it's funny, you're right, like it's such a weird joke and weird decision, but who cares.
It's wonderful. I think it's the epitome of the film just held up into one little moment because it's so much louder than everything else. Like it's louder than the talking, it's louder than the music.
Yeah,
It's just like
that's
obnoxiously loud.
Jerry, yeah, I've noticed that in a few of the in this movie and in other movies, Jerry Lewis will
Uh-huh.
like he'll do like the YouTube video comedy thing where he'll suddenly make the audio like really, really loud. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, like which I don't think I've ever like seen that
No.
in any other comedy movie. He's like he's like an insane guy. Like he's crazy.
The mixing is just wild, but it's so wonderful and I can't help but really laugh at moments like this. But poor Jerry Lewis, the nutty professor, he can't catch a break everywhere he goes. He's just he's not unliked. I mean, he's obviously a very likable character, but the jocks pick on him and the girls laugh at him and the dean doesn't like him.
Like blowing stuff up.
He's blowing stuff up, which there's another great joke in the Dean scene where he talks about the last time he blew someone up and they go back and forth with he keeps
Yeah.
asking about like different people that were blown up or not killed but severely injured by
Yeah.
his previous experiments.
Yeah, the dean is just like, you know, don't stop like doing your own experiments like at the college, essentially.
Which makes sense. I guess if you're blowing people up, maybe you shouldn't be. I guess that's a thing to be angry about.
Yeah, it's not like an unreasonable request. Yeah, they make it seem like the dean is really evil and bad, but his the request itself isn't exactly unreasonable or particularly like, yeah, like mean,
No,
which is, you know, just another kind of weird funny decision.
it's a great decision. But the nutty professor, he doesn't want to get picked on anymore.
Yeah, he's fucking tired of he wants to be a Chad jock.
He wants to be a jock. And so he goes to the gym, which is a hilarious scene. And I agree with you. I wish there were more gags there, but there's some great gags.
Because he goes in there and they do like a wide shot of the whole gym, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh boy, let's go. You're kind of like rubbing your hands a little bit. You're like, all right, what crazy things are you gonna get? And from there, they kind of do this thing where they go back and forth to him in and out of the gym. And I feel like they don't do
Hmm.
enough gags in the gym, but what he does is pretty funny. I'm thinking of the one where he's like holding the barbell and it makes his arms really longer. That's another example where the audio is suddenly like really loud and
Yeah.
piercing. And I that's a good one. I like when he's doing the
The pulley thing.
yeah, and like there's like a guy on the other side of the wall like working on it or something like that. Or like he go or like or forgetting the funniest joke, which is like he goes in there and everyone is so much taller than him. That's funny too. I like that.
It's wonderful. My favorite gym joke is when he first gets there, he meets the trainer, and the trainer's like, "We don't allow glasses
Oh
in the
yeah.
gym." So he
Oh, he
starts
takes it up.
apologizing
Yeah.
and takes off his. And they do this a couple of times where he'll just keep talking, and people just like walk away. It's
Yeah.
perfect. It's
Yeah,
everything
that's
you
good
want.
too. Yeah, but he he's going to the gym and stuff, and he gets invited to a party
Yes,
at the Purple Pit.
purple pear pit, purple pit,
And
right? Is it
by
purple
yeah,
pit?
the Purple
Okay,
Pit, because it's literally like it's the pit
it's a
before.
pit.
Yeah. And he gets invited by his like crush, and he is just kind of like he's not getting results, right? Like he's not Chad. He's not a Chad yet.
It's not working out.
Yeah, he's really like upset about it. And so he's like, wait a minute, I'm a chemist. I should concoct a magical potion which will like maybe we could that will maybe make me a Chad, a jock Chad. And so yeah, that's basically what he does. That's basically like the heart of the movie.
He makes a magical potion with a series
Yeah.
of chemicals,
Yeah, whatever.
which creates a sort of Jekyll and Hyde situation.
Yeah, it's basically like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type movie. That's
Yeah.
basically it's like that story basically. Yeah, I personally I was fooled, and I shouldn't have been fooled. I should have known better, but I was fooled by like when he makes the potion, then he eats it, and he is like he eats it, and he turns into like a monster. He's starting to turn into like a
Yeah.
monster and stuff. And I'm like, oh, I thought he was gonna be like a handsome, like I thought he was gonna turn into a handsome guy. And then they do that thing where it cuts, and they do that shot where they're like panning over to all these people that are like staring
Hmm.
at Professor Kelp, and he like I love how he goes into the purple pit and everyone stops, and I just like how it zooms in on Jerry Lewis then, and he's like a Chad cool guy. And it's like, wow, oh, okay, so he is like he's so cool and he's so handsome now, I guess, that everyone had to stop and stare at him, not because he's a monster. I just that it fooled me because I thought like, oh, is he actually going to be like a monster? Oh no, it is what I expected it to be.
Yeah. I too was fooled. I was expecting the monstrosity. And another amazing thing
Yeah. It doesn't make
is he doesn't take the potion until about 30 plus minutes into the film.
it takes a while, yeah, to get
It
there.
takes its
Yeah.
time, which I'm not complaining about. I like that it
Yeah, it's
takes its time.
fine.
It's not like 5 minutes in, okay, he takes the potion. Like we give our patience, right? We wait and we
Yeah,
wait, and it's gives a much better payoff, I think. I think if that came
agree.
5 or 10 minutes into the film, there wouldn't be much of a payoff, and you really wouldn't get the
That would be
full,
insane. Yeah.
yeah, you wouldn't get the full Nutty Professor experience. You wouldn't get to know him as a person before he becomes an extremely
Buddy
handsome
Love.
prick.
Well, yeah, it's like
Buddy Love.
the other thing about the Buddy Love character, and I'll just say this up front. Jerry Lewis, he's not exactly like a bad looking guy or anything like that, but it is kind of funny that we're expected to believe that he's supposed to be like this kind of like hunky guy. I guess you could argue, you know what I mean? Like he's just kind of like a middle-aged dude.
He's like a 1960s handsome guy, like the James
I
Bonds of the
guess.
eras. Like they weren't that good looking.
I don't know, like Sean Connery's a good looking guy. He's cool. Jerry Lewis, even when he's trying to act really cool and slick,
Yeah,
I don't know. I just think it's like kind of a funny thing to try to
I
like.
I agree. It's a little bit. It's a little bit of a stretch.
There's still something kind of like nerdy and kind of a little bit nerdy about him, but he's cool. And and the other thing too, like, and they don't mention this, but this is my own theory. I'd like to think that like maybe his potion also maybe affected his pheromones, so that's why people are so like attracted to him.
Oh,
But that is just
yeah.
completely my own theory.
I buy it.
But yeah, he's cool now. He's slick. He's buddy love. He's talented. He can play the piano and sing, but he's an asshole.
the giant asshole.
He's not nice.
No, he is not in any way a likable person. But I like your idea of him giving off some sort of pheromones because he has this sort of effect over everyone, as if not only is he the world's greatest human being, which let's put that aside for a second, but basically everything he does, it's as if God himself is in the room.
He's not that good looking. It's like I don't know, but he's not bad looking either. It's just like it's just
No,
funny to think that like he's so good looking that. Which, by the way, I do like the sets in the movie. I like the purple pit set a lot.
sets are wonderful. The whole vibes of this film are so very 60s.
Early 1960s vibes, and it feels very early screwball. There are plenty of comedies that are made before this and plenty made after this, but this one feels still particularly modern. It doesn't feel too
Yeah,
outdated, which is why it was probably remade when it was, kind of mid 90s. I see, the appeal of it still. And those early 1960s vibes and sets are still really great.
they're so good looking and just such a particular color palette too. I mean, with the bright
Yeah.
colors of the potions and the way the purple pit looks, it's just wonderful to look at. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a pleasure to the eye.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Yeah, and once again, he goes there and he verbally abuses like a bartender, and I like when they drink and like
He
he
makes the
makes like that
drink.
crazy drink and he gives us he takes a sip of it and then he freezes and you realize like oh he freezes and then I think he falls over.
Yeah.
It's so fun. It's really funny. Yeah, and then he also makes a connection to Stella Purdy.
Hmm.
She's attracted to him, but she doesn't like him.
No, because he's an asshole.
He's like mean.
He's a mean person,
Yeah.
but everyone loves him anyways. It doesn't matter. He's just so charming and good looking
Yeah.
that he can just be whatever he wants.
He like beats up people and stuff. Like he gets into fights and his little quips that he gives to insult people do make me laugh.
He's got some great quips.
He's got all of his little things to make fun of people and yeah, and he upstages all like the guy students that are hanging out with Stella Purdy. And I think after this they go and they drive, right? They go drive up into the
Hmm.
hill. He's an asshole.
And you know what happens up on hills and cars, Andrew.
Yep. 1961. But this is also where you realize that the potion has it wears off after a while.
Wears off. You got about what, 8, 12 hours
Like
tops?
like maybe a night, yeah, like
Yeah, you got a night.
and like he like
And it doesn't happen all at once either.
yeah, like his voice starts to get affected and so I like how he just like runs away off the hill and she's just like sitting there like what?
That's wonderful. I love how he goes from his deep masculine voice to his high pitched night. I love his nutty professor voice. I really enjoy this sort of grating.
He really does a lot of the voice. And it's just kind of this like back and forth in the movie where you have the nutty professor where Kelp is trying to balance between being Professor Kelp and Buddy Love.
Sure. The classic sitcom conundrum.
Yeah. Where he's trying to like still be like the regular professor, teach his students, but also be the swagged out cool guy at the Purple Pit who like sings and plays piano and everyone's like, wow, he's so good.
He's trying to live two lives, but unfortunately, as all great sitcoms do, the two lives must eventually collide.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, like I said, you get a lot of like back and forth between the people, and I think eventually the school dance comes around.
The prom
The
thing.
prom. It's so funny. Like,
It's got to be a
I
college, though, right?
I think it's supposed to be a college.
Yeah. Maybe just back in the 60s, they had proms in college.
That's a good point. Maybe we don't know.
Different times.
I don't
I
know,
don't know.
but they're like planning it, the cool prom. And so they're like, oh, who we're gonna have perform there? Da, 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 da. And some of the girls are like, we got to get Buddy Love. He's so great. Da, 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 da. It's like, well, how? And the dean is like, well, how? Can we contact him? I need to talk to him. I need to meet him. And they're like, well, we don't have his contact information and all this stuff. And then Kelp is like, oh, I know him. I can reach out to him and you can meet him. Yeah. And then of course they meets the dean of the college or whatever, the principal, the dean, the
I don't know. Dean, principal. He is called a dean, I think, but he acts more like a high school principal, which again is another one of those confusing things of if it's a high school or if it's a college.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter, I guess.
No, doesn't matter.
It
Different
does.
different times. But Buddy Love, he works his charm and he charms the dean into that great Shakespeare scene.
Yeah, he strokes his ego
Hmm.
where he's just like, "Oh my God, you're such a good act." Like that one is just like it keeps on going and going and going. It's just one of those gags where it's just like it never stops. Where he's like, yeah, like he's having him like get on. He's like, "Oh, you did." He's like, "Oh, well, I did Shakespeare. Oh, you should get on the table. Oh, you should wear this hat. You should wear this. Like you you know." He's like he like keeps on like giving him like items
Yeah.
and things and stuff and just stroking his ego and like, "Oh, you're such a great performer. You could have been an actor. That's a fun, cute scene. I like that character.
It's just so silly. And again, just Jerry Lewis just sort of hearkening the same bit over and over again until like what it's way too far. Like, like the second time you're like, I get the joke, but he just keeps going and going and going, which is perfect. It works perfectly for Jerry
Yeah, I
Lewis.
like it. I like it a lot too. Yeah, Jerry Lewis, like he is I really do think he's a funny guy. Once again, I could see like a regular person with a not with a functioning brain on like mine, like watching it and being like, this is not funny. Jerry Lewis is not funny. Like he sucks. He just makes silly faces and then he falls and his bits go on for too long. And I understand that, but I don't care. I like it a lot. I find it to be very because at least it's like a thing that was made by a guy. It was a guy who he's in it, he wrote it, he directed it, total filmmaker. He did it, and it's completely his own vision and his own and because it's his own vision and because it's his own vision, it is very imperfect. It's not like
Hmm.
which I personally find very interesting and very fun to watch rather than a studio comedy made today, which is, constructed by, like a marketing committee to ensure that, every single joke is appealing to every, demographic and group, while like a Jerry Lewis movie is pretty much unconcerned with that.
Yeah. And I think that's a very admiring thing to see in a filmmaker because whether you like Jerry Lewis's stuff or not, his stuff is very much his. And The Night Professor is very much a Jerry Lewis film. So even if you don't find his bits funny, even if you think they go too long or not long enough, or whatever your complaint is, I think one thing you can't complain about is that Jerry Lewis isn't making the film that he wants to make. Because this is very clearly Jerry Lewis going, this is the bit I'm going to do. And then whatever anyone says, like, this is it. Like, this is just how it's going to go. It's not clean. It's a little dirty on the edges. And I think that works best for this film.
I still think it's funny.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I found myself like laughing quite a bit throughout the movie, just to like at all the just the various when he's the Nutty Professor, when he's Professor Kelp. I like when he does the silly stuff, and then when he's Buddy Love and he's like making fun of people and stuff. I like that too. So I think it's all good all around.
It's good all around. And the dean is smitten with Buddy Love,
Yeah, he gets to perform at the thing.
but he also must be a chaperone, which again
Uh
confuses things.
oh. Yeah,
So what is he gonna do? How is he gonna both be Buddy Love and Professor Kelp at the same time? How is it gonna work out, Andrew?
it doesn't. So he's like, what's his plan? He's just gonna go and do the potion and come back.
Yeah, so he's gonna be a chaperone, and he's gonna do the potion, take the potion, and they'll come back as Buddy Love, and it'll all work out. But he's got a problem.
His fucking pet bird ate the formula. Yeah.
His fucking pet bird.
Yeah, he's upset with the fact that yeah, he has like the pet bird that like talks a lot and it somehow in its cage gets the formula and rips it up for some reason. It eats it. And earlier in the movie he actually sends a copy of his formula to his parents. So there's that whole parent section. There's that weird like part where like he's like remembering being a baby, which that part was like
Yeah,
really scary, where he's like the Nutty Professor, but he's a baby. And he's like
Jerry Lewis
watching,
plays a baby.
yeah, and he's like watching his mom belittle his father and like emasculate him or whatever. But he sends like the formula to his parents and he tries to get it from him, but it doesn't work out. So he has to just kind of like create something. We know it's not gonna go well. The set, by the way, of the dance is kind of interesting. Looks pretty good. It's like giant, like where the band is
Yeah, it's a
playing.
giant gym.
Obviously not a real gym, but yeah, it's
Oh yeah.
but it's cool. Yeah, Buddy Love, he goes on stage and he's like, ready for he's like a he's doing his crooner, like a shtick.
I love that. And before that, he has Jerry Lewis has all of his chaperone little gags that he does. I love when
Oh
I
yeah.
love his little
Yeah.
dance.
Oh yeah, he
Like
does
when
a
he gets
dance
into the music.
and he gets and like the dean gets mad at him for some reason. There's not like no
Yeah.
explanation why.
Because he's supposed to be chaperoning, he's supposed to be serious. He's not supposed to be dancing.
He puts his arm in the juice, which is just like once again, that's such a it's a very like low like fruit, but I love it.
Uh-huh.
Like him putting his whole arm in the juice. And the juice bowl is like way too it's like gigantic. Like
So
why is it so
big.
large? Usually it's like, like something like that big. Like when you see it in a movie,
Yeah.
But it's huge in the that's so weird. Stuff like that is just like why that detail? So funny.
So meticulous. So wild. But I love all the chaperone gags they does. And again, they have another chaperone gag where he's talking to the dean and he starts having a conversation. And the dean just goes off and talks to another person, but the nutty professor, Professor Kelp himself, just keeps talking. And they have like three conversations overlapping each other, which it's kind of hard to tell what anyone is saying at those moments. Like it's hard to sparse out, but it doesn't matter because it's funny and hilarious, and I love it.
This part of the movie to me is like really like funny and surprising where right like he's Buddy Love and he's singing
Mm.
and he's like a ring a ding ding, he's singing his crooner songs or whatever. But the potion, it's not perfect. It's not working and it and it wears off, like on stage in front of everyone. Like it's in front of everybody that he basically knows and has been interacting with. This part of the movie is so funny to me and it's so just like where he instead of like I don't know, like doing another gag or joke, for some reason Jerry Lewis decides that this is the moment where he's going to be sincere and he does like a very long speech about how he is sad that he tricked everyone and that he asks for forgiveness. And it's like several minutes long while he's on stage doing this. And then he does a speech and then he leaves. And I was imagining like an Adam Sandler movie in which this happens. And then after he does the speech, the crowd boos at him and throw stuff at him. You know what I mean? Like you could
Yeah.
easily imagine that in an Adam Sandler movie or some movie like that,
Hmm.
where some person is like being like honest and sharing their feelings, but then the crowd that they're talking to turns on him anyway, and that's the joke.
Yeah.
But in this movie, that just like does not happen at all. Everyone just is kind of like, oh wow, yeah. I just find that decision really funny where there's no joke.
That's kind of the joke, right? It's
I guess so, yeah.
that moment of sincerity, but it's also not that other thing where he's seeing those sort of more sappy comedies where everyone sort of like yells and cheers and he gets carried off in a sort of parade, especially when you juxtapose it to the next scene in the film, which is the final scene in the film. Like it feels almost sort of purposely self-conscious in some sort of way.
Yeah.
You feel uncomfortable because he gives this big long speech, and of course typically when you give these big long sincere speeches, the music swells and everyone gets excited and it's kind of like the climax of the movie, but Jerry Lewis doesn't play it that
There's no
way. He sort of
that's true,
just,
yeah.
yeah.
But the other thing too is what I'm saying is that like and usually that moment is undercut with another joke,
Right.
but it's not that way at all.
No. It's a really intriguing decision at that moment, which I think was the right move. I think it works perfectly in the moment.
I think it's funny. Yeah, there is something about him like there is something kind of and the whole moment itself is just kind of like funny and it's definitely like Jerry Lewis being like this moment has to be serious, has to be dramatic. It's got to be.
Yeah, but he doesn't overplay it either, right? He doesn't
Not
have the
really. No.
swelling
I think he does a
music.
good
There's not
job.
like the, yeah,
That's
he
true.
toes the line, which I think is a very hard line to
Yeah.
toe, but I think he does a perfect job of it.
And then after that, like he meets up with like Stella Purdy, and Stella Purdy's like, I didn't really like Buddy Love all that much. Like he was an asshole. Like you yourself are really nice actually. And I just like you the way that you are. It's like, oh, that's nice, and it does that cut where they're back in the classroom and like Kelp, he's like tanner and he's got like his like hair is a little bit different. And I actually kind of like that message of like it's good to be yourself, but also if it's also okay to like self improve if you want to. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of the message. I'm not saying that the like the movie has like some good messages about like just kind of accepting who you are and and being like a nice genuine person instead of being even if you had the potion, even if you had a potion that would make you super cool, it would make you an asshole and not a genuine person at all. So, I think there's some interesting, like fun, kind of constructive messages, but the whole ending of the movie is really weird.
Yeah, I mean, he basically destructs his own message at that moment because, of course, his parents who got the formula basically become con men. They become hucksters and sell the formula at $1 a piece, right, for
Yeah.
these huge profit margins, which, of course, that's what happens. Like, that's the only ending that you can really expect. I mean, I love the fact that it just ends up becoming this sort of commodity that you can be beautiful for a night for a price, right? You get the right price and you too can be beautiful. And you have this moment where Purdy and Kelp are like, well, we're better than this, we don't need this. And they walk away, but of course that's undercut because Purdy has purchased a couple bottles of this formula.
Oh yeah, she does like a wink kind of like ooh, like thing, and it's like yeah, stuff like that. It's like I feel like moments like that are just yeah, stuff like that I think is like very tacked on and it's very like insane. Just to
Yeah.
like put in like that quick. And then you even have like the closing credits where the characters like come out and they bow. And I think what like Lou he like falls and like it
Yeah.
makes like the film being projected which is like kind of that's also like kind of like a funny joke as well, like kind of like pretending as if like the movie is like was interrupted or something like that. Like
Yeah.
the movie itself is not very complicated
No.
plot wise. It's almost 2 hours long, but plot, not a lot happens. It's mostly just a lot of like hanging out, which is fine with me. And the other movies I've seen are basically the same thing in which Jerry Lewis inhibits like maybe like one or two characters and he interacts with all the different other characters and these sets and situations. And it's just kind of like a way for him to kind of like put out his various ideas and jokes that he has at his disposal there. And they're very physical and stuff like that. And that's kind of like the idea of these movies for the most part. And they have like music and song and dance and all this stuff as well.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I was reading that great Buster Keaton biography. Buster Keaton, one of the reasons that he didn't succeed in the world of sound, which there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons was he had pretty much no interest in plot. The plot for him was only a way to develop his gags, and the whole film was really about the gags. I mean, even if you think of Buster Keaton's most famous work, like The General, well, of course, there is a plot, right? He's trying to get the train and the sort of thing, and find Professor and all that. At the end of the day, it's really just a series of gags, and that's kind of how this is too. Like, yeah, there's a story here, right? He's the mighty professor and he wants to be cool and handsome and blah, blah, blah. But really, that's just a means to an end because the real value of films like this one or the work of so many silent filmmakers or even Jacques Tati and the like is the plot sort of just is the tissue that holds everything together. But it's really just about the individual gags and just making those
Sure,
gags
yeah.
as absurd and silly and phenomenal as possible.
Yeah, and yeah, there's definitely plenty of like you said, comparison to Keaton and Chaplin, but I still think that Lewis stands out because there's something incredibly I don't know, there's just something kind of he wants to be Chaplin, he wants to be Keaton a lot, but I think he's held back by the fact that he is like kind of crazy. I don't know how to describe it. He's just kind of I just think his perspective on like movies and stuff like that is just even more crazy. And it just very his movies are meticulous, but they're also I don't know, he's just kind of like a weird enigma. Chaplin and Keaton, they're very clear. And the movies that they make are very clear. Lewis, obviously a very intelligent guy, hardworking guy, clearly. But he's such a weird like enigma, where he kind of goes back and forth between his movies being really smart and really dumb. In a way, he might even be even more interesting than maybe Chaplin and Keaton are from just like the way that his movies function. Lewis also to kind of like talk a little bit about Lewis more. Once again,
Yeah.
I don't know, like I've done
Your
like
most well researched
my most
podcast.
well-reached podcast is the Nutty Professor episode. I really do think like Jerry Lewis is a very interesting guy. He He directed and starred in what might be one of the most famous unreleased movies ever, called The Day the Clown Cried. And it's a movie that I think pretty much finished with production, if not almost finished production, in which he plays a clown that ends up in a concentration camp. And it's like a dark comedy. And it's like I believe I read that it is a relatively early Holocaust movie, like one of the first ones ever made. I recommend like going through like the Wikipedia page for it because it's very, very interesting. It had like terrible like production issues, and there are many quotes from people who saw the movie that say that it's a masterpiece, and then also quotes from people that said that it sucks, that it should never be released. And I think Jerry Lewis, he said like I never want it to be released, but he did donate like a rough cut to some library, like maybe the National Library or something like that. And I think it won't be shown or released until like 2024. So it's coming out.
Oh shit.
So we're gonna see the fuck that where I'm gonna
So
see
the
that
reel
shit.
still exists and it's in a good enough condition that
I think so, but I think it's like I don't think it's like finished. It's like not like it might be finished. I don't know.
do you think it's one of those things kind of like Orson Welles' The Other Side of the Wind, where people who worked on the project or people who knew about the project will kind of finish the film? Or do you think it's something where they'll just release it as it was?
No, I don't think people care enough to finish it because people Orson Welles, it's like is Orson Welles, so I think it would take too much money. Lewis's son did say that there is no complete negative of the film,
Okay.
and I think there are also copyright issues.
Right.
I think there are multiple issues that maybe will keep it from being released, but still really interesting. Just another kind of chapter in the Jerry Lewis, filmmaking thing. I just find him to be very interesting, and I like the movie.
All right. Well, I guess the only thing left to do is to
Yeah,
give some final thoughts. So I'll go first since you were clearly so well researched, and I'm sure we'll up anything I have to say by the nth degree. I really enjoyed this movie. I'm kind of glad we haven't talked in the last few weeks just because I've been able to have it on in the background, even just without sound, just kind of watching it as I have on right now. It's really just a joy. I mean, some great sets, very 60s vibes. I love the buddy love look. I love Professor Kelp. There's some really great gags in this. I think it's really silly. I think it's really funny. I genuinely think that plot just doesn't really matter in a film like this. I think plot can be very important in a film, but I don't think it always has to be. And in this, the plot is sort of meaningless and doesn't really matter. And I don't think that's a complaint in any sort of way. I think it definitely shines in the physical comedy over the spoken comedy, though there are some really great jokes in this too. Overall, I had a really good time. I think it's a kind of film that I love to have on in the background. It's not really a film that I would love to kind of sit down and watch over and over again, but just from the essence of it, I love just having the film on. I think it's the perfect background film. So I'm going to give this a very strong 6 out of 10.
yeah, I'll give it like a 7 out of 10. I think it's good enough. I think it's a lot of fun. I don't know. I don't have a lot to say about it just because I already said a lot, but I just think it's like a good, funny early '60s Jerry Lewis, insane, harebrained film, and there's really nothing else like it. It's just a good comedy film.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can get this podcast early and new podcasts at our Patreon at patreons.com/342. You can also find everything I do at Austin Lugo12.
Yeah, I'm on Letterboxd at Retro Andrew, RETR0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Theater42 or With Nothing to Say. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks.